So why Florence? Why Florence specifically? And why the Renaissance?
Well, why Florence? Because in 1968, I ended up in Florence, kind of accidentally, and discovered that there'd been a massive flood which had destroyed everything. And I stayed there to work in the National Library washing the books for 2 months as a volunteer. And then I ended up living in Italy for 10 years. So I became, well, I keep going back all the time. You know, it's part of my life now, Italy, and Florence especially. So it was in 2019, I think, that on one of my many visits to Florence, I went to an exhibition of Leonardo da Vinci's art. Well, especially his plant drawings. It was absolutely the most fabulous exhibition. And I could see that he'd drawn the plants in meticulous detail, and that every plant he chose was actually a medicinal plant. Yeah. So I thought, oh, this is interesting. And then I went to visit a hospital called Ospedale di Maria Nuova. Oh, what was it called? I can't remember. Anyway, I went to visit one of the first hospitals in Florence, and there was a botanical garden in the hospital. It was built, I think the hospital was built by the father of Beatrice. Beatrice, the girl who, oh, you know who Beatrice is. Beatrice. Anyway, I went and visited this herbal garden inside the hospital and saw all the plants were planted in these terracotta vases, and they had the name in Italian and the name in Latin and the medicinal use of each one. I thought, ew, that's interesting. So I really started to get interested at this point and thought, let's investigate further. And then I discovered that the Medici were all, you know what Medici means? It's the plural of medico, which means doctor. So the Medici were called doctors, which in those days meant plant doctors. They were all interested in plants. They were all interested in plant medicine. The thing about the Medici was that they were the first bankers. They invented ways that you could get money from A to B without actually having to carry the money, i.e. sacks of gold. You could just take a promissory note from one place to the other, which obviously made it much easier for traders to trade. And so they would obviously pay the Medici for this service, and they made lots and lots of money. And rather than putting the money in the sky, as people like Elon Musk do nowadays, they used it. They spent it. They spent it all. They spent it on art. They spent it on architecture. They spent it on science, philosophy, alchemy, and they were hugely enthusiastic about everything they could think of. And it was. So this was a period, the Renaissance was a period when there were when the Medici everybody flocked to Florence to get the Medici to pay them to paint pictures, to build beautiful places. And then Cosimo I, the Grand Duke, decided that he would set up a department in Pisa University to teach medicine, which means herbal medicine, of course. So he asked the best botanist he could find, who was Luca Ghini, if he would come and teach the students. And Luca Ghini said, yeah, I'll come, but only if you let me actually make a botanical garden in Pisa, a big one. And Cosimo said, yeah, sure, anything you want. So he provided him with a huge space and lots of gardeners to look after the plants. And Luca Ghini went out and he found, he sent his students out looking for plants, and they plant this, they plant that. They planted everything they could think of that was medicinal in this garden. And then Luca Ghini would take his students out to the garden to teach them about an individual plant. Say, right, we use this, and that's what it looks like. And take note of exactly what it looks like and point out all the various details of the plant. So, this was something totally new, because before that, doctors just used to go to these pharmacies, that were everywhere. And they just, spezzeria, and they just used to say, oh, give me a potion to cure headache or whatever. And the pharmacist would just say, okay, we got this potion here. And the doctors had no idea what was in it.
Oh, right, okay. That sounds dangerous.
Yeah, they had no idea what was in it. They would just hand over a thing and they would pay for it and, treat the patient. So under Cosimo's project, if you like, and Luca Ghini teaching his students which plants would cure what, they had a complete revolution in the way that herbal medicine was carried out. So I thought this was really interesting. Then Cosimo decided that he would make a botanical garden in Florence. Because he said, when the students come back from Pisa, back to Florence, because most of them live in Florence, they need a place where they can go in the summer and still look at medicinal plants. And, they mustn't forget what they've learned before, because summers are very long in Florence, So, well, in Italy in general. So, they might be away from the university from June through to late September. So they needed another place. And that botanical garden in Florence is still there. I visited it. And the plants are all labeled. I mean, it must have gone through a lot of changes since those days, because a lot of the plants there are just colourful and pretty.
Oh, right, okay.
And not necessarily medicinal. Also, I went there in March, and a lot of the plants were still indoors. They hadn't put them out yet.
Right.
Because they plant them in pots, so that in the winter they can take them indoors and look after them, so they don't all die in frost.
Yep.
Because they do have frost in Italy.
Okay, right. You don't think about that, do you? Being here, we're used to it in Britain, but you don't think about that in somewhere like Florence.
So yeah, I was able to trace, the origins, if you like, and trace it through my various books till I got to Florence. I suppose I could carry on and write another one about what happens in Florence next or something. I don't know. I haven't really thought that one out yet.
If it's meant to be, it will.